The galaxy remembered the day they banned humanity. Even centuries later, the stars themselves seemed quieter when the story was told, like they didn't want to wake the sleeping monster they'd exiled. They said it was justice, they said it was necessary, but everyone knew the truth. It wasn't about justice, it was about fear. The war on Dravik IV had been the beginning of the end. It was supposed to be a clean campaign, measured, predictable, efficient. That's how the Galactic Council liked its wars. Controlled violence, civility wrapped in armor plating. But then came the Terrans. They arrived late to the war, flying ships that looked like rusted knives compared to the bright, curved cruisers of other races. Their armor was scratched. Their engines screamed like dying stars. Their pilots joked during battle comms, even as they bled. Everyone thought they were insane. Until the fighting began. For 3 long days, one small human battalion held back 5 planetary armies. The Dravik front burned under the weight of their defiance. Where the Varnak generals used precision strikes and the Illyrians fought with elegance, the humans fought with rage. They didn't retreat when outnumbered. They didn't surrender when surrounded. They laughed. They fought like death was just another problem to solve. When the enemy finally breached their defenses, the humans didn't run. They overloaded their reactors. They turned their ship into a sun. Half the enemy fleet vanished in the light. After that, no one called them weak again. But no one called them allies either. The Galactic Council gathered soon after, 50 species, 50 trembling delegations. Each one had a reason, some moral, some political, most terrified. The humans were brought before them, their representatives standing tall in plain gray uniforms. No gold trim, no medals, just faces lined with exhaustion and pride. Councillor Threx of the Varnak took the floor first. His scaled skin glittered under the hall lights as he hissed. Humanity's methods are unacceptable. The destruction at Dravik IV was disproportionate. A ripple of agreement filled the chamber. Words like barbaric, irrational, dangerous echoed through the translation systems. The lead Terran, Admiral Elias Mar, simply folded his arms. "We won the war," he said quietly. "You ended a planet," shouted the Dreth envoy, his tendrils twitching in fury. "You scorched everything, friend and foe alike." Elias met his gaze without flinching. "And the enemy stopped killing civilians after that, didn't they?" Silence. The Illyrian diplomat, elegant and pale, raised a trembling hand. Perhaps it's not victory we should fear. It's what you call necessary." Elias looked at her with tired eyes. Necessary is what keeps your children alive. When the vote came, the decision was nearly unanimous. Humans were to be banned from all galactic wars. No fleet access, no military rights, no trade in weapons. They called it the Terran War Exclusion Act. To the Council, it was an act of preservation for the galaxy and maybe for the humans themselves. To Earth, it was an insult carved into history. The humans didn't shout or beg. They didn't threaten. They just stood up, gathered their things, and walked out. Before he left, Admiral Mar paused at the doorway and looked back at the glittering chamber of aliens. "You'll call us again," he said softly. "One day when something worse than us comes knocking, and when that happens." He smiled, a thin, tired smile. "We'll see if you remember how to ask nicely." Then he was gone. Decades passed, the galaxy healed, or at least pretended to. The other species told themselves it had been the right choice. The humans were unstable, dangerous, too emotional. They needed peace, not war. On Earth, peace came with silence. The Terran fleets were dismantled, the soldiers sent home. Factories closed. Veterans filled bars, telling stories to anyone who would listen. Stories about comrades who smiled before battle, about the sound of reactor alarms and laughter mixed together. Children grew up never knowing what a real war looked like. And yet, Somewhere deep beneath the planet's calm surface, the embers of pride still burned. Humanity didn't forget. They built colonies far from the Council's reach, mining moons, terraforming worlds the others thought uninhabitable. Uninhabitable just meant interesting to a human. They didn't build fleets, at least not officially. They built exploration vessels, heavily armed exploration vessels. They didn't train soldiers. They trained security contractors. The galaxy ignored it. It was easier that way. And so, the years turned into centuries. The stories of Dravik IV became legend, then rumor, then myth. The Council spoke of it only in whispers, as a warning to new recruits and young admirals. Never fight alongside humans, they said. They fight like gods and die like devils. Still, in the far corners of space, traders told stories of human outposts that didn't die when pirates came, of raiders who disappeared after attacking Terran convoys. No one could prove it. No one dared to try. And somewhere in the quiet dark between the stars, humanity waited. They didn't seek war. They didn't crave destruction. But they remembered. They remembered Dravik IV. They remembered the vote. And they remembered Admiral Mar's last words. So they built and watched and waited for the day when the galaxy would come crawling back. Because one thing was certain. If the universe ever forgot why humans had been banned from war, they'd remember soon enough. 200 years after the ban, the galaxy was on fire again. It started on the edges, small colonies, forgotten worlds, outposts so distant even the Council barely remembered them. The distress calls were always the same: static, then screams, then silence. The Zelthar swarm had arrived. No one knew where they came from. Some said they were machines that had eaten their makers. Others whispered they were a species that had merged with their own weapons, living ships, feeding on energy and flesh alike. Whatever they were, they didn't talk, they didn't negotiate, they devoured. Planet after planet fell. Fleets vanished into burning skis. The proud Dreth Armada, 20,000 ships, was gone in a single week. The galaxy had seen wars before, but not like this. The swarm didn't conquer, it erased. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, panic spread like infection. Ambassadors shouted, their voices overlapping in a storm of fear. They've broken through the core rim. The Dreth colonies are gone. We need reinforcements. Reinforcements from where? We're out of fleets. The Counselor of the Illyrians, pale and trembling, rose above the noise. We must unite what remains. All species, one army. But even as she spoke, a whisper moved through the room, an idea none dared to say aloud. Someone finally did. What about the humans? The chamber froze. Eyes turned, tentacles twitched, fins rippled, someone hissed, someone laughed bitterly. Counselor Threx, the same Varnak who once voted to exile them, slammed his claws on the table. No, we will not invite them back. You remember what they are. They're killers, muttered another. They're survivors, said a quiet voice. It belonged to the Illyrian diplomat, Lyra Ven. She had studied human history, their wars, their madness. They warned us, she said softly. Admiral Mar warned us this day would come. Threx's scales bristled. You want to unleash them again. You've seen what they do. They'll burn half the galaxy just to win. Lyra looked around the chamber, at the hollow faces, the desperate voices. And if we do nothing, she said, the swarm will burn all of it. Outside, the news was worse. The Zelthar reached the Dreth capital world. Within hours, its oceans boiled. The Council sent every remaining ship they had. None returned. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy trembled, not in anger but in fear. On a private channel, Lyra sent a message the Council had forbidden for 2 centuries. It was short, almost pleading. To the Terran Confederacy. This is Ambassador Lyra Ven, of the Galactic Council. The Zelthar are coming. We are losing everything. We need you. Then she waited. For 3 long days there was nothing. Just silence. On the 4th day, her console flickered to life. A simple message appeared, no symbols, no insignia, just text, written in plain human script. Request received. Payment due upon delivery. Lyra exhaled slowly. The room around her fell silent as others read the same message. They're coming, she whispered. The first Terran ships arrived 3 weeks later. The Council gathered to witness their return. They expected gleaming warships, polished and grand like the Illyrian fleets. Instead, the humans came in shadows. Their ships were dark, scarred, shaped like blades hammered out of wreckage. They carried names written in crude white paint across their hulls. Hell's Debt, Iron Ghost, Last Laugh, Remember Dravk. The aliens watched the arrival in uneasy silence. Primitive, one murmured. Unrefined, said another. But when the human fleet spread across the void, blocking out the stars, no one spoke again. Lyra stood at the observation window and felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope mixed with fear. The humans didn't broadcast music or battle hymns or heroic speeches. They didn't talk at all. They just came. The Council tried diplomacy first. They sent a delegation to greet the Terran flagship. The ship's name was Hell's Debt. Inside, the air smelled like metal and smoke. The walls were scratched, patched, alive with the hum of old engines. At the center stood Admiral Reyes, a woman with gray streaks in her hair and eyes that had seen too much. Lyra bowed. Admiral Reyes on behalf of the Galactic Council. Reyes raised a hand. Save it, you're not here for speeches. Lyra hesitated. We are grateful. The swarm has overwhelmed our defenses. We've lost entire. Stop, Reyes' voice was calm, almost kind. We read your files, we saw your losses. You want the truth. Lyra nodded weakly. Reyes leaned forward. You're not losing a war, you're surviving an extinction. The words hit like gunfire. Lyra tried to speak, but Reyes continued. My people know what extinction looks like. We've danced with it before. You banned us for that, said we were too savage, too dangerous. She smiled faintly. Well, that's exactly what you need now. Back in the council chambers, debates raged again. The Varnak hissed that humanity couldn't be trusted. The Dreth shouted that they were monsters. The Illyrians stood quiet, haunted. Lyra simply said, they already saved us once. Outside, the stars burned brighter. Because now, for the first time in centuries, the humans were on the move again. Their fleets left orbit without ceremony. No grand formation, no music, just silence, and then a whisper on every frequency in the galaxy. Terran Confederacy engaging the swarm. The first battle was about to begin. And the galaxy, trembling in its golden towers and marble halls, remembered what it meant to call humanity for help. They remembered why humans had been banned. And now they would see why that had been a mistake. When the Terran fleets left orbit, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. For 200 years, humans had been a ghost story whispered in war rooms, a cautionary tale told by generals who had never fought beside one. Now, that ghost was back, and it wasn't here to haunt. It was here to hunt. The Council had asked for help. Humanity had answered. But no one, not even the desperate, was ready for what that meant. The first system the humans reclaimed was Vora Prime, a mining colony the swarm had turned into a hive world. The Zelthar ships hung in orbit like dark insects, their hulls pulsing with sickly green light. Every species that had tried to take Vora back had failed. The Illyrians had lost half their fleet there. The Dreth had lost all of theirs. Now, the Terran fleet drifted silently on the system's edge. Inside the command deck of the flagship Hell's Debt, Admiral Reyes stood over a holomap of the planet, her jaw set and her eyes cold. Her officers waited quietly, helmets off, faces scarred, tired, human. "Status?" she asked. "Swarm ships are clustered near the equator," said Commander Voss, a broad man with a rough voice. 27 hives, 30 orbital platforms. No civilian life detected. "Good," Reyes said. "Then we don't have to hold back." Someone chuckled quietly. Someone else muttered about time. Reyes looked up, meeting every gaze in the room. "They think they can erase us," she said. "They think we're animals. They think we forgot how to fight. Let's remind them." Then she smiled, the kind of smile that made the council diplomats back on the Hell's Debt shiver. "Light it up." The human fleet didn't advance in formation. They scattered. Ships broke apart into hundreds of smaller groups, vanishing into debris fields and shadow. The swarm scanned, confused. No signals, no patterns, no sense. Then came the first explosion. A lone Terran cruiser dove straight through the swarm's outer ring, guns blazing, taking 10 enemies with it before splitting in half. The wreck exploded, throwing molten fragments into the next hive ship. The swarm tried to respond, tried to form ranks as they always did, but every time they moved, the humans were already there. Hidden drones detonated from inside their hulls. Nuclear fire bloomed like newborn suns. Radio silence filled the void except for one phrase whispered across Terran comms. "For Dravik." Hours later, the Illyrian observation ships finally arrived. They found only wreckage. Vora Prime was surrounded by burning debris. Swarm ships floated like corpses, their organic metal bodies split open. The Illyrian captain whispered, "By the stars, they destroyed them all." "Where are the humans?" her second asked. As if in answer, hundreds of Terran ships decloaked from the dark side of the moon. One transmission came through, simple, clear, human. "Vora Prime is clear, you're welcome." When the report reached the Galactic Council, silence filled the chamber once more. "They destroyed 30 swarm hives in a day," said Lyra Ven quietly. Counselor Threx slammed his claws on the table. "They nuked the planet, they burned the surface." "They saved it," Lyra replied. "They erased it." Lyra turned on him, her voice rising for the first time in her life. "That's what victory looks like when you're fighting extinction." The room fell silent again. Everyone knew the truth. The swarm had never lost before, until now. And the ones who beat them were the same creatures the galaxy had cast out. Meanwhile, on the Hell's Debt, Admiral Reyes stared at the scorched remains of Vora Prime on her screen. The surface glowed red from atmosphere ignition. Commander Voss approached quietly. "The Council's not gonna like this one." Reyes snorted. "They didn't hire us to make friends, they hired us to win." She took a sip of cold coffee, eyes never leaving the burning planet. "You ever notice something, Voss?" "What's that?" "The galaxy only remembers us when it's dying." That night in the crew quarters, soldiers sat together in silence. Some laughed, some cried, some drank. They all knew what they were: outcasts, weapons, monsters in the eyes of the civilized. But when humanity was called, they didn't hesitate. They never did. "Think they'll thank us?" someone asked. Voss grinned. "Nah, they'll pretend it was strategy." Laughter echoed through the metal halls, harsh, tired laughter that hid pain behind pride. Because deep down, they all knew what was coming next. The swarm wasn't finished. Vora Prime was just a skirmish. The main hive was moving. The next battles would be worse. But that was fine. Humans were built for worse. Across the stars, the other races began to watch humanity's movements closely. Some with awe, others with horror. They studied the combat reports and couldn't understand the logic. No centralized command, no perfect tactics, no predictable formation. The Illyrian analysts called it madness that functions like genius. The Dreth called it murder with poetry. But the humans had another word for it: instinct. A week later, the Council sent another encrypted message to Earth. The swarm is advancing toward the core systems. Can you stop them? The reply came within seconds. Stop them, no. We'll end them. And somewhere in the deep black, fleets of human ships shifted direction. Engines roared to life. Hulls scarred and smoking turned toward the heart of the war. For the first time in centuries, humanity wasn't defending. They were coming back. The galaxy had called them monsters. Now those monsters were the only hope left. The galaxy had seen wars before, but none like this. When the humans went to war, they didn't march in lines. They didn't wait for orders or speeches. They moved like a storm, loud, unpredictable, and impossible to stop. To the Galactic Council, war was a game of strategy. To humanity, it was survival. And survival had never been polite. The swarm gathered in the Rathian system, a vast hive of biometal ships that turned the void into a living nightmare. Each vessel pulsed with green veins, like giant hearts beating in unison. The planet below was nothing but flesh and machinery, a world the swarm had digested and rebuilt for itself. It was their nest, their fortress. The Council had tried to destroy it before. They'd sent fleets, beautiful, shining fleets of silver and blue. None had returned. Now the Terran Confederacy approached. The Hell's Det led the charge, followed by the Iron Ghost and 1,000 smaller vessels. Their ships didn't shine. They looked like floating scars, black and angular, marked with words and symbols the aliens didn't understand. Names of lost cities, faces of fallen friends, little pieces of grief carved into metal. To the Council, they looked like savages. To the swarm, they looked like death. Admiral Reyes stood in her command room, watching the holographic display flicker with the enemy's movement. Her crew waited silently behind her. No speeches, no ceremony, just focus. Status, she said. Commander Voss glanced at his screen. Swarm forces are shifting formation. Looks like they've spotted us. Good, Reyes replied. Let them. Across the human fleet, soldiers buckled helmets, muttered prayers, kissed photos. Some laughed softly. Others stared into the dark, whispering the same word that had carried through generations of human wars. Ready. When the battle began, there was no warning. The swarm fired first, raining plasma from the orbit of Rathian. Beams cut through the void, painting the stars in green fire. The humans didn't dodge. They dove through the beams, engines roaring, hulls glowing red from heat. Every alien watching from afar expected them to die. But the Terran ships didn't break. They scattered, vanished from radar, then reappeared behind enemy lines. What are they doing? Shouted an Illyrian observer from the Council fleet. Something insane, another whispered. It wasn't insanity, it was instinct. Inside one of the smaller cruisers' last laugh, the crew worked in near darkness. Smoke filled the air, alarms screamed, and still, the captain smiled. They think they can swarm us, she said, gripping the controls. Let's swarm them. Her ship plunged straight into the enemy formation, weaving through the living metal ships as her crew dropped charges behind them, minds glowing with blue light. The swarm ships turned to chase. The last laugh spun hard, engines flaring, and disappeared into the black. Seconds later, the charges detonated. The swarm's formation folded inward, ships colliding, fire spreading like a disease. And from the chaos came the rest of the human fleet, emerging from stealth like ghosts. Every explosion looked like a sunrise. Missiles cut through the darkness in streams of fire. Plasma torpedoes slammed into organic hulls, burning through layers of armor and tissue. The swarm screamed, not over radios but through vibrations in space itself, an eerie chorus of rage and pain. The humans didn't scream back, they just kept firing. On the Hell's Det, Admiral Reyes gave one simple command. Hit their hearts. Her ships obeyed. They aimed not for weapons or engines, but for the core of each bioship, the pools in green nodes that served as the swarm's living brain. Each time one burst, the rest of the hive faltered, confused, blinded. It was precision born from chaos. The swarm tried to retreat. That was their final mistake. Humanity had already learned how they moved, how they thought. The fleet split into dozens of smaller groups, cutting off escape paths, herding the enemy like hunters chasing wolves. Every move the swarm made, the humans were already there, waiting. Hours passed, fire consumed the Rathian sky. By the time the last swarm ship exploded, the human fleet had lost a quarter of its forces, but they'd destroyed everything. The council observers were speechless. They had watched from a safe distance, recording every moment. To them, it hadn't been a battle, it had been an extinction event. "By the stars," whispered one Varnak general, "they don't fight for victory, they fight to erase." Lyra Vin, standing beside him, said nothing. Her eyes were wet but not with fear. She saw what no one else did. Behind the chaos, the humans were mourning. Every strike, every explosion, every desperate act of courage was born from a single, terrible truth. Humanity didn't want war. They hated it, but they were good at it. Too good. When the battle ended, Admiral Reyes opened a calm line to the council. Her voice was calm, steady. "Rathian system clear. Swarm fleet neutralized. Minimal survivors. Recommend evacuation before we glass the planet." There was a long pause before anyone replied. The council's speaker, his voice trembling, said, "You mean you're going to destroy it?" Reyes smiled faintly. "Not destroy, sanitize." Later, when the swarm hive on Rathian burned in the planet's atmosphere, Reyes stood on the bridge in silence. Voss approached her quietly. "We lost a lot of people." She nodded. They knew the risks. He looked at the burning planet, eyes full of reflection. "Do you think the council understands now why they banned us?" Reyes watched the flames rise until the world went dark. "Oh, they understand," she said softly. "They just don't like what it says about them." Far away, in the cold halls of the council chamber, Lyra Ven looked out the window at the flickering light of the burning world. "They saved us again," she whispered, "and we still fear them." No one answered. Because somewhere in that silence, every species in the galaxy began to wonder. What happens when the humans stop fighting for us and start fighting against us? The victory at Rathian should have brought peace. Instead, it brought questions. The swarm had been wiped from the system, but the council could not stop whispering about the cost. Entire worlds had burned. Millions of civilians had perished. Even space itself shimmered with radioactive ash. The galaxy had been saved, but not gently. In the council chamber, the debate raged for days. Alien voices echoed through the grand hall, full of outrage and fear. "The humans are dangerous," shouted Councillor Threx, his scaled hand slamming the table. "They destroy everything they touch." "They destroyed the swarm," replied Lyra Ven calmly. Her silver eyes glimmered in the light. "Something no one else could do." "At what price?" hissed a Dreth admiral. "They turned an entire planet into molten glass." "They saved your capital world," Lyra said. "Would you rather be dead?" The Dreth fell silent. Lyra looked around the room, her voice low but steady. "They fight the only way they know how, the way we refuse to, because when humanity fights, they don't think about pride or rules, they think about winning." Threx sneered. "That's what terrifies me." Meanwhile, far from the council's shining halls, the human fleet drifted in silence. They had won, but no one on board the Hell's Debt was celebrating. Bodies had been ejected into the void after Rathian, men and women wrapped in flags, floating toward the stars. On the observation deck, Admiral Reyes stood alone, a small flask in her hand. She took a slow drink, watching the stars move past like distant ghosts. Commander Voss joined her quietly. Council's not happy, he said. They're calling it a war crime. Reyes didn't look away from the window. Good. Voss raised an eyebrow. Good. She nodded. Means we did our job right. Later that day, a council delegation arrived on the Hell's Det. Among them was Lyra Venn, sent to ensure compliance with galactic humanitarian standards. Reyes met them in the war room. The air smelled faintly of oil and gunpowder. The walls were lined with holographic maps and the names of fallen ships. Lyra tried to speak first, but Reyes cut her off. I know why you're here, she said, crossing her arms. You think we went too far. A Dreth official stepped forward. You didn't go too far, Admiral. You obliterated an ecosystem. Rathian is dead, forever. Reyes turned to him, eyes cold. So is the swarm. Lyra stepped between them. Admiral, please. The Council only wants assurance that civilians won't. Reyes barked a laugh. Civilians on Rathian. Did you even look at those scans? She slammed her hand against the hollow console. Images filled the air, corpses cocooned into the walls of bioships, children fused into machines, whole cities turned into feeding pits. Lyra covered her mouth, eyes wide. The Dreth went pale. Rey's voice was quiet but sharp. Those weren't civilians anymore. The swarm used them, turned them into part of their hive. She leaned closer. You call it mercy when you refuse to act. We call it cowardice. The room fell silent. After the meeting, Lyra found herself wandering the ship's memorial hall. It was a narrow corridor lined with hundreds of names engraved in steel, Terran soldiers lost in battles the Council had never even recorded. She stopped when she saw a plaque near the end. Dravik IV, 35,000 lost. Beside it hung a small flag, burned around the edges, folded carefully beneath glass. Rey's voice came from behind her. That's where it all started, she said softly. The day the galaxy decided we were monsters. Lyra turned to her. They're wrong. Reyes gave a small, sad smile. No, they're not. They just don't understand what kind of monsters we are. The next weeks were a blur of battles. The humans pushed deeper into swarm territory, reclaiming lost systems faster than any species thought possible. But each victory looked more like apocalypse. Planets burned, stars dimmed. The swarm died screaming, and with them everything they had touched. The galaxy watched in awe and horror. And for the first time, they began to understand. This was not strategy. This was vengeance. At one outpost, human ground forces liberated a colony the swarm had partially consumed. The survivors, if they could be called that, were found inside the hives, fused to the walls, still breathing. Some begged for death. When the Illyrian medics arrived, they froze at the sight. One turned to a human soldier, voice trembling. You killed them, all of them. The soldier, a woman barely 20, looked down at her burned hands. We freed them. Her voice cracked, but her eyes didn't. Back on the Hell's Det, Reyes sent a report to the Council. The swarm doesn't take prisoners. Neither do we. Stop asking us to fight pretty wars. Pretty wars get you pretty graves. When the Council read it, there was outrage again, official protests, calls for tribunals, investigations. But not one of them volunteered to replace the humans on the front. And so humanity kept fighting. Not for glory, not for gratitude, but because someone had to finish the job. Rey stood before her fleet one night. Her voice carried through every ship in the network. This isn't about the Council anymore, she said. It's about us. The swarm doesn't understand peace. They only understand survival, so we'll speak their language until they stop speaking forever. Then she paused. We are not heroes. We're the last warning this galaxy will ever get. From that day, the phrase spread like wildfire through Terran ranks and alien worlds alike. The last warning. And in the silence that followed each battle, the stars bore witness. Every time humans showed mercy, the enemy came back stronger. So now mercy had a new name: extinction. The swarm was dying, but it wasn't finished. For every hive the humans burned, another rose deeper in the dark. They were cornered now, desperate, and desperation made monsters even more dangerous. Their last fortress was in the Erebus expanse, a place so far from the galactic core that even light itself seemed to hesitate before entering. No one had ever gone there and returned. Until now. The Terran fleet gathered in orbit around the black star at the system's heart. Thousands of ships, scarred, battered, still burning from their last victory, stood ready for one final war. This was it. The end of the swarm. Or the end of everything. Inside the flagship Hell's Det, the air was heavy with silence. Admiral Reyes stood before her crew, her hands clasped behind her back. Every officer, every soldier on board watched her with weary eyes. Some had been fighting for years without rest. Some had lost everyone they'd ever known. But all of them were still standing. 200 years ago, Reyes said softly, the galaxy banned us from war, said we were too dangerous, too unpredictable. A low murmur moved through the room. She smiled faintly. They were right. That earned a few tired laughs. Rey's expression hardened. The swarm's main hive is here. If we don't end it, there will be no galaxy left to save. No Earth, no home, nothing. She looked around the room, meeting every pair of eyes. We've fought too long and lost too much to stop now. Whatever happens, we finish this. Then she whispered the order that would be written into galactic history. Light the fire. The Terran fleet moved. Engines roared to life, tearing streaks of blue across the dark. Drones launched ahead, mapping the twisted abyss of the swarm's territory. What they saw defied understanding. An entire moon made of flesh and steel, pulsing like a heart, surrounded by millions of ships. Every one of them alive. They're waiting for us, Voss muttered. Reyes nodded. Good, saves us the trouble of chasing them. The battle began before the fleet even reached orbit. The swarm struck first, massive organic cannons firing streams of acid and plasma. Whole Terran squadrons vanished in seconds. But humanity didn't retreat. Every death fueled the next charge. Every destroyed ship opened a path for the next one. Fighters dove between the enemy's living hulls, planting warheads by hand. When their weapons ran out, they rammed their ships straight into the hive's defenses. It was madness. It was beautiful. From the Council's observation station light years away, the alien ambassadors watched in horror and awe. They're sacrificing entire fleets, cried an Illyrian commander. Lyra Ven's voice trembled. No, they're winning. Hours turned into days. The sky burned brighter than any star. Then the humans deployed their final weapon, the one they swore they would never use again. It wasn't a bomb, it wasn't even a missile. It was an idea born in desperation, whispered about only in Terran myths. The Silence Protocol. When the command was entered, a single Terran ship, a small corvette called the Eidolon, broke formation and dove into the center of the swarm hive. Inside, the pilot, Captain Marakel, sat alone. Her face was calm, her hands steady over the detonator. She opened her comm to the fleet. Tell them we did what we had to. Then she smiled and whispered, for Dravik, for Earth. And she pressed the button. The explosion didn't look like light, it looked like absence. Sound vanished, color vanished. Even the stars seemed to blink out for a heartbeat. When vision returned, the swarm was gone. The hive world was gone. The ships, the debris, even the echoes gone. All that remained was silence. The kind of silence that hums in your bones. On the Hell's Det, the crew stared at their screens in disbelief. It worked, Voss said quietly. God help us, it actually worked. Reyes didn't answer. Her hands trembled slightly. Get me a scan. Nothing, Admiral, the whole system just erased. She looked out the viewport at the black void where an enemy empire had once stood. Then it's done. Voss exhaled shakily, and the Eidolon. Reyes didn't look away, she's with them. Back at the Galactic Council, news spread faster than light. The swarm was dead. The war was over. There was celebration at first, shouting, weeping, relief. Entire planets lit fireworks across their skis. But as the joy faded, another feeling crept in. Unease. Because when the reports came in, they revealed more than victory. The humans hadn't just killed the swarm, they had erased them. The entire Erebus system was gone from galactic charts. Space itself had been torn apart. And the Terran fleet, missing. Lyra Venn sat alone in her office, staring at the last message the humans had transmitted before disappearing. It was short, like all human messages. Swarm gone, invoice attached. We're taking a break. She smiled sadly. A break, she whispered. They deserve one. Then she looked out her window, at the stars glowing quietly beyond the council's dome. Somewhere out there, humanity was still alive. She could feel it. Weeks passed. The galaxy began to rebuild. For the first time in centuries, there was peace. But peace without the Terrans felt fragile, empty. Ships went searching for them. None returned. Whispers spread in the dark, rumors of human fleets seen near the edges of dead space, drifting like ghosts. And sometimes, late at night, traders swore they heard voices on their comms. Rough, tired voices, human voices. Stay safe out there, galaxy. We'll be watching. Back on Earth, the skis glowed brighter than ever. Cities rebuilt, families returned home. But in the quiet corners, in the bars where veterans drank, people still spoke of the Erebus stand. They called it humanity's greatest victory and their greatest loss. Because the humans hadn't just destroyed their enemy. They'd sacrificed their place among the stars to do it. And somewhere, deep beyond the galaxy's edge, in a dark system no map could find, the Hell's Debt drifted quietly. Inside, Admiral Reyes sat in the dim glow of her command deck, recording one final log. Her voice was tired but proud. The swarm is gone, the galaxy is safe. They'll call us monsters again. That's fine, monsters keep the dark afraid. She paused, looking out at the endless black. If they ever forget what we did, the silence will remind them. Then she closed her eyes. And the last Terran fleet vanished into the dark. Part VII, the understanding. Tilde 800 words. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy was quiet. The swarm was gone, the war was over. But so were the humans. The stars they once burned across now shone untouched, cold and distant. The Council rebuilt their worlds in peace, their fleets repaired, their people healed. Yet the silence that followed victory felt heavier than war itself. Every world owed its life to the Terrans, and every world knew it. But no one wanted to say it aloud. Because saying it meant admitting something terrifying. That everything they had ever feared about humanity had been true. Years passed. Children were born into peace, never knowing the sound of war. The Council grew stronger again, their fleets shining brighter than before. But in the quiet corners of their grand chambers, whispers never stopped. Where did the humans go? Did they die? Or are they still out there waiting? Rumors became legends. Traders spoke of ghost fleets drifting at the edge of space, dark ships with Terran markings that appeared when pirates attacked, only to vanish once the threat was gone. Some said they were just old satellites. Others swore they heard voices on deep space channels, voices that laughed, swore, and then disappeared into static. And sometimes, in the middle of that silence, a faint human transmission would echo across the stars. Stay safe, galaxy. You're welcome. Lyra then never forgot them. She was old now, her once silver hair pale as starlight, her voice soft with age. But her memories were sharp, too sharp. She still saw Admiral Ray's face in her dreams, calm, determined, a fire that could burn through despair itself. She remembered the way humans fought, how they smiled before battle, how they joked when death was near. They weren't fearless, they were just defiant. And that defiance had saved everyone. Now, as the galaxy rebuilt, Lyra often found herself staring out from her office window, looking into the endless dark where Earth had once sent its fleets. "They gave us peace," she would whisper, "and we repaid them with fear." One day, decades after the war, a signal reached the Galactic Council. It was faint, old, wrapped in encryption no one had seen for generations. The technicians worked for hours before they finally decoded it. When the message appeared, the entire chamber fell silent. It was a voice. A woman's voice. Grainy, distorted, but unmistakably human. "This is Admiral Ray's of the Terran Confederacy. If you're hearing this, then the swarm is gone. You survived. That means we did our job. Don't look for us, don't thank us. Just remember what we taught you." There was a pause, a long, quiet moment where only static spoke. "You thought we were monsters once. Maybe we are, but monsters keep worse things away." Then came the last words. "Take care of the Galaxy Council. It's yours now. Don't lose it again." And the message ended. For a long time, no one spoke. Even Counselor Threx, old and weary now, had nothing to say. Finally, Lyra Vin stood, her voice trembling but steady. "They didn't vanish," she said softly. "They chose to leave, they knew what they were." She looked around the room, her eyes hard. "We called them dangerous, but the truth is, we were too afraid to see ourselves in them. Humans weren't born monsters. We made them that way." The room stayed silent. No one argued. Because deep down, every soul there knew she was right. Over the following years, humanity became legend. Some worshipped them as saviors, others cursed them as demons, but no one denied the truth: they had changed the galaxy forever. New military academies were founded in their name. Soldiers studied Terran battle logs, their chaotic tactics, their unpredictable nature. None could ever truly copy it. "You can't train madness," one Dreth general said grimly. "You can only fear it." A century later, a new war began. Not with monsters, but with ambition. Old rivalries reignited. Border skirmishes turned to invasions. The council fractured again, its unity fading like dust in the wind. And just as it had before, the galaxy began to fall apart. Until one night, when a distress call went out from a border world under siege. Halfway through the message, static filled the channel. The technicians tried to clear it, but then something strange happened. A new signal cut through, low, rough, human. "This is the Terran Confederacy. We told you not to lose it again." The voice paused, then added almost playfully, "We're back." Across the galaxy, scanners lit up. Thousands of unknown ships emerged from dark space, black and jagged, with names written in the same white paint that once terrified the stars. Hell's Dead. Last Laugh. Remember Dravik. They were older now, patched and rebuilt, but still alive, still human. The returning fleets broadcast one final message to every corner of the galaxy. "We heard you were fighting again. Couldn't let you ruin our hard work." When the council demanded an explanation, a single transmission came through from Admiral Ray's old flagship. The message was simple. "We don't do peace talks. We do peace enforcement." And with that, the Terran fleets moved, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as guardians of a fragile galaxy they had bled to protect. They struck with precision, ending wars before they could begin. Their presence alone stopped fleets mid-flight. Their reputation did the rest, because everyone knew what happened to those who tested the patience of humanity. In time, the galaxy stopped fearing them. It started respecting them. Children learned about the Erebus stand in school. Veterans raised their glasses to the ghosts who saved the stars. And somewhere out there, among the dark edges of forgotten space, human ships kept watch. Waiting, watching, laughing quietly among themselves. On a quiet night, Lyra Ven's great-granddaughter sat at the window of her ship, staring into the dark. "Grandmother," she whispered to the stars, "are they really still out there?" And for just a moment, through the static of her calm, a voice whispered back, rough, warm, unmistakably human. "Always." The galaxy finally understood. Humans were never banned because they were monsters. They were banned because they were the only ones willing to become monsters if it meant everyone else could sleep safely in the light. And from that day forward, one truth echoed through every world, every fleet, every star. You can fight beside humans. You can fight against them. But you will never survive forgetting them.